right, why don't we get started? Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's session. We're super excited tonight to have two new brewers in the community, Jill Watanabe from Tsuki Sake in Salt Lake City, and Gabe Castillo from Miami. And tonight's session is being moderated by Andrew Centofante of North American Sake Brewery in Charlottesville. And Andrew, of course, is chairman of the board of our Sake Brewers Association. So without further ado, let me hand it over to Andrew and he'll take it from there.
Cool. What's up, everybody? Really excited to be here to help host this conversation. We're hoping this is a conversation, so I've got questions prepared, but along the way, if you guys feel like you've got any questions you want to ask, feel free to kind of jump in. But if possible, if everyone could mute your mics while you're not talking, that'd be wonderful. And yeah, I'm just excited to be here. So, for me, I love this kind of conversation because, we've been open here in Charlottesville for 3 years, but I remember those moments in the early planning stages of getting our brewery off the ground. And I know how challenging that is. I know how just how unbelievably difficult it can be. And so I'm excited that the association now exists to help new brewers kind of get on their feet, to give people ideas, to give people a real sense of community. And so I appreciate that all of you are here to join us and be part of this conversation. But yeah, let's kind of jump right in. Like Wes said, we've got Jill Watanabe, butcher this, I'm sorry, Jill Watanabe from Tsuki Sake, based in Salt Lake City, and then Gabe Castillo, Big Water Sake, based in Miami. And you are both, from what I understand, at pretty early stages of this. And so I'd love to start to talk, and I think first, get to know you both a little bit. So I think if you could both kind of introduce yourselves and kind of give us the big picture. How did you get into sake, and where did you kind of have the moment when you decided that this might be your new career?
Gabe, you want to go ahead?
Sure. So as Andrew has kindly said, my name is Gabe Castillo, right, from Big Water Sake. I am currently actually a practicing attorney for a law firm called Nelson Mullins. And coincidentally, or maybe not so coincidentally, I represent founders of companies. I represent startups and venture capital. And I love sake, clearly, as I'm kind of making a switch from practicing law. But I do get the question a lot, like why sake, especially in Miami. And it really actually goes back to my father. He introduced me to sake at a very young age. In Latin culture, you get a drink kind of early on from your parents. And, I think I might have been like 8 or 9. He was handing me some sake at like the sushi restaurant, or if we were at, like a Benihana for the kids or whatever it was, he was always passing me some sake. And I always really liked it. I always really enjoyed it. And, fast forward to college and law school, I kept drinking it. I brought it to, my friends' houses while we're having dinner, watching the football game, whatever it was. I was always the guy bringing it. And I sort of eventually became like, eventually became like the sake guy in my friend group. And, shit.
She was like, walk away.
You guys, like, John and Kim, if that's okay. So yeah, that's pretty much it. The rest is kind of history. I stumbled upon the Sake Association after brewing for, I don't know, I did home brews for a few years, especially in law school. I was doing it. I always wanted to sort of do something like this, and once I started working, I forgot. And I was living in Toronto, where it's a really good place to be a sake enthusiast in Toronto. There's a lot of sake bars, there's a lot of restaurants, a lot of selections and all that. So my thirst was quenched in that regard. So it was nice to be there. But then I moved back to Miami, back home a few months ago, and it was here that I said, let me look online, see what there is. That's when I ran into Wes. That's when I went to the sake Brewers Association, and that's what said, you know what, this is a great resource. This is huge. It's answering a lot of questions that I had before, and I decided, you know what, let's do it.
That's awesome. Miami, what I've heard too, is it just like Florida in general is big on the sake scene right now. There's a lot going on, a lot of movement down there. So it's an exciting place to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It actually is really popular. I mean, you'd be surprised. There's a lot of restaurants around here that have a pretty good selection. There's, liquor stores in downtown that have just an excellent selection, 100+ brands. The culture seems to be growing, and so I'm happy to be here, and what I believe to be is the first craft sake brewery in the state, and I really hope to get the ground running pretty soon.
Nice. So Joe, what about you? How did you get into this crazy world?
Well, a little bit of my background. So I'm a half Japanese Salt Lake City local. I've been in Japanese cuisine for like a decade. Definitely fell in love with the food and obviously sake at the same time. I think every sake enthusiast can agree that once it can change your life. And that's essentially where I started I was doing a course with the Sake School of America. I've since graduated as a sake sommelier with them. And I don't know, I love that you can always learn more about sake. Once you're in, you're roped. So I got really interested in the brewing process. And honestly, originally my plan was to go to on an internship in Japan. And that was in 2019. So we all know what happened next. But I just kind of wanted to utilize that time to, pivot and see what other direction I could go. There were a couple webinar brewery tours that I attended that kind of, lit the fire in that. One was Miho Imada, based out of Hiroshima. She's one of 50 female-owned and operated tojis in Japan out of 1,500 sake breweries. And then the other was William from Colorado Sake Company. They did a tour. I totally loved his style. I gave him a call, asked him if I could do an informational interview. I had all these sake brewing materials like in my Amazon cart that I was just going to start home brewing. And then he kind of talked me out of it. He's like, it's pretty hard to brew. Why don't you just come learn from us? And so that's essentially how my company has been started. Tsuki Sake, Salt Lake's first sake company. We're currently contract brewing with Colorado Sake Company. So testing the market,
Cool.
Learning how to brew, and also just looking for a brick and mortar currently. So.
Wow. So I guess like two pretty different approaches, one kind of heading down the homebrew path and one going towards more white label. And I think both are very awesome ways to kind of start the business. I think the idea of kind of getting your feet wet with the product itself and getting out with on the shelf is such a great way to kind of test the market and see. So how's that been going? I mean, I think one, working with another company to kind of get a product on the shelf. How's that been working with another brewer? How did you, figure out the best way to work together? And then Gabe, I'd love to hear more about kind of your homebrew setup.
I think that it's been awesome collaborating, because we definitely have different brands. So his is more, I want to say granola for lack of a better word, but I mean, it's awesome. They have the most, I think they have the most flavored sakes on tap in the US. So and then experimenting with like infusions and things like that. Whereas like not that we're not leaning towards infusions, but I just really wanted to lead my company with premium items, like one of our first items is a Junmai Daiginjo, brewed with Yamada Nishiki rice milled at 50. So
coming out the gate strong, Daiginjo.
Yeah, I guess. I know.
Yeah,
no, sometimes I'm like, did we go too strong, like straight out the gate? I don't know. People like it, and it's something that's approachable for newcomers too. So just because a lot of people, they start with hot sake and then they just write off sake. They're like, oh yeah, I don't like sake. To which I always rebuttal, well, did you like your first beer? Because mine was Miller Lite and I still kept coming back for more. But yeah, there's the premium sakes though, I think, especially for wine, people that like wine, you can kind of like show them a different world with how to drink sake.
So how many sakes do you have currently in the market?
So right now, Tsuki means moon in modern Japanese. So right now we have the Super Moon. It's a premium Junmai Daiginjo. And then we also have our flavored white peach Nagori, which I named Harvest because some people were having a hard time saying Junmai Daiginjo. They were saying Jumanji. So I was like, let's just name it. So a little easier.
So what are your insights so far? You've got 2 on the market. How long have they been on the market for? Like
they hit in the spring of this year.
And what were some of the initial, how many bottles did you like come into the market with, and what has kind of been the reception to that so far?
So we actually had a pallet each of both products. And the timing of everything was kind of serendipitous in the sense that it was the time of year where all the Japanese sake was stuck and no one could get Japanese sake.
It's a crazy time for that right now.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, don't even get me started on shipping. We'll get it. But yeah, and so serendipitously enough, our products launched right when, I was talking to all these different restaurants and telling them about our products, and they just, it was just perfect timing. So sales have been really good, really going really well. Every opportunity is a learning opportunity to teach people, about sake and try to spread the love of how great it is.
Very cool. Are you, in terms of like your brand and what you're hoping to kind of bring to the table, like, do you guys, like you said, you're looking for more like premium styles of sake. So what do you think that your, brand or your focus is going to be once you kind of get rolling a little bit more?
I think as of right now, it's probably more premium sake that is served cold, and how to pair it with food, how to integrate it into foods that aren't just sushi and Japanese foods, but kind of expanding consumers' knowledge of what they can drink with what they're eating, and how sake is lower in acidity, so it complements food, it doesn't fight with food. It's not like wine where you kind of have to be careful about how you're pairing things. The versatility is awesome too. So as far as brand, it's open. We're starting with premium. We definitely want to make an impression that we're a premium brand. It could grow in a number of ways, just because there's so many different styles of sake, and also depending on, what local consumers like.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's just a lot of ways to kind of test what you guys could be with having a product out on the market this early. That's awesome. So Gabe, your approach is more on the homebrew side. You kind of dove in on that. Love to hear about what does that look like for you? Like, what's your setup at home? Are you brewing now?
Yeah, so it's been a bit since I've had the last batch, but I think consistently I could have done maybe about like 100 liters a month or something like that, give or take. I've been mainly using the Yamada Nishiki rice as well, doing a Junmai Ginjo. That's kind of what I've been doing consistently, and I think that's what I want to keep doing. I would say one of the difficult things that I'm sure we'll get to is how different is it going to be when I start scaling? And I in my head I said, let's get a couple rounds in, let's make sure it tastes good. Everything kind of sort of checked the boxes of what I wanted to get to. But then I said, this is going to change in taste probably when it's time to get things in bulk. And I can't buy some of the things that I've been using right now in bulk. I have to maybe change strands of yeast, whatever it is that I have to figure out, and that can certainly change it. And so the home setup right now, it's like I said, it's enough to sort of get things going. It's a good place to try new things. But that's part of that's the extent of it. And I think that now I'm sort of focusing more on, whether it be finding a space, maybe partnering up. I think what Joe's doing is a very cool idea, innovative, and I've got a couple close friends here in Miami who have started a beer brewery here in the city, and it's quite big. It's a local beer. They do sell it around the state, which of course Florida's quite big, but it's mainly Miami where they've got a pretty large presence. They're selling them now already at the Dolphins games and Heat games and all that stuff. And so I started that conversation recently about, potentially sort of borrowing a little spot in there and say, hey, can I can I set up some things? Can I buy some equipment? Can I put some things in here? If that's okay with you guys. And what I'm, another sort of thought that I've had now, especially after talking with everyone, here and with Jill, is there's probably other routes where I can start experimenting, keep doing the experimentation, make sure that I get the right taste that I'm looking for. Similar, I do want it a little bit premium and start scaling at that point once I'm feeling more comfortable, instead of getting equipment that I'm not sure works.
Yeah, I mean, obviously equipment and scale are huge steps, and can be extremely daunting as you're kind of trying to figure it out. But the same question for you, like, what are you hoping your brand or your brewery is going to achieve, and like, what do you want to be known for?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I think it would be pretty successful here in this market. There is, I think, a demand for it. I am starting to think I want to have a sort of tasting room / restaurant type of setup where, maybe similar to your typical brewery where you go in, you could do a tour, you can get flights, stuff like that. But I also would think about serving food. I'm a big proponent of also what Jill said. It doesn't have to just be sushi or ramen. You can drink sake with a ton of stuff. I am a big pasta eater, and I love eating it with pasta. I do it all the time, especially like a seafood pasta, or I make this lemon pasta at home that I probably eat like once a week, and I think it pairs great. It really does pair with just about anything. And I'm a big spokesperson of that, and I think that also has been helpful in getting that conversation going with my friends and my family. And they're all drinking it more now. I see it on my brother's fridge. He has a bottle in there now, and that's how you get the conversations going, right?
Yeah. So in terms of that, like a tasting room or a restaurant, that's something you're considering adding to your brewery?
Yeah, I mean, the restaurant component I don't think would be huge. I think I would just sort of like to have smaller sort of plates, something that you can kind of munch on while you're tasting the sake. It's not so much a full entree, maybe like a 6 to 10 small plates that you can kind of share with friends, and like I said, sort of learn that you can have this really good tasting sake with your normal meals, right? So when you go home, you make a TV dinner one night, and you can open the bottle of sake because it's Thursday and you feel like having a glass or two.
I mean, in terms of Miami and Florida, like, what does the laws look like around that? Because the reason I ask that is because in Virginia, we had to have a food component in order to serve sake, in any kind of real way in a tasting. So, that was a big pivot for us to have to open a restaurant component. So I'm just wondering, in Florida, is the law influencing that at all? What kind of challenges are you seeing in terms of the law and how sake is classified there?
Yeah, so luckily with my legal background, I was able to get a little ahead of that stuff, and I started looking into it. I wouldn't say I'm fully versed yet, just because I'm so much in the early stages. I haven't really gone through the weeds of it all, but Florida, for better or for worse, it's a pretty relaxed state with their laws, as most people know. And so it's not too bad. I know a lot of places you don't need to serve food, so I don't think that's a concern. And I think maybe that's some of the difficulty I'm having, because they're not very black and white. They're not very strict. It's like, where are the rules? Where are the restrictions? And so there certainly are, of course. It's not the Wild West either, but the laws, generally speaking, are pretty favorable, especially when you're just shipping locally within the state. Obviously, when you're in a spot, especially as a lot of people here know, I'm sure there have establishments already, it's a little bit more complicated when you're looking to ship at other states, and the interstate commerce all of a sudden comes into play and certainly complicates things. But luckily, given that I want to at least start local first, let's crawl before we can walk. It's not too daunting, that part. I'm kind of, after doing an initial search, I'm kind of leaving that in the back burner for now, because I feel like it's something I can overcome, not too difficult.
Yeah. And I think there's huge benefits to having a kind of home base where people can come and get that experience, to get the full kind of piece of that, whether that's the pairing with food or just sitting with a bartender and kind of building a base in that way. So again, speaking from personal experience, it is difficult to start a restaurant in general, and to have a food component. But the benefits of that, I think, are that you have more of an intimate moment. You have opportunities to kind of interact with your customers and to build a base that can be really important down the line. Jill, what about you? Are you when you think about where you're headed, is there a restaurant or a tasting room component of your brewery?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of my favorite parts about sake is what can we eat with this, but as far as scale, I'm not sure exactly how large of a restaurant we would want. Maybe izakaya, kind of what you were saying, Gabe, like where it's just small plates. Also, sake is really high in alcohol content. So if you want people to drink more of it, you probably need to throw them some food as well. My business partner is actually an executive chef at a Japanese restaurant in Park City. So I know he would, depending on how much time he has to also work on a project like that. So yeah, I mean, I've always kind of imagined it with a food component, and, the liquor laws in Utah have a reputation as well. So depending on the type of liquor license that we get, we may need to have food, how your is where you have to have a food component. But that could be tricky in itself, because they also require 70% of your sales to be food. If so all the breweries here, they have to abide by those, strict rules. So I'm not sure how that would affect a sake brewery, because it's classified as wine in Utah, as opposed to beer. Mm-hmm. So they're just, learn something new every day about the liquor laws here.
I mean, all I can think about is Salt Lake City Punk, and that it seems restrictive in that way. And I just know, we're restrictive here in Virginia sometimes. And so I imagine it would probably be difficult. I mean, have you ran into issues in terms of law and obstacles you've had to overcome there?
I mean, the selection of sake itself in Utah could be better. They don't really, it's getting better. I've noticed new sakes on the shelves. I'm not sure if that's because of our brand, showing up and them seeing that there is a growing market for it and testing and bringing things in or whatnot. But yeah, they tax the hell out of it for sure. And yeah, just, trying to be, we're the new kid on the block. We're trying to just learn all the rules and follow all the rules. And there's a lot of them. So
I actually, both of you, I think, said this, but you used the term liquor store. So I'm wondering, is it sold through a government controlled liquor store versus, here in Virginia, we're in grocery stores? Is it regulated like that in y'all states?
Absolutely. In Utah, and it's gotten better, because it used to be 4%, 4.2% was the highest you could go.
Yeah, I heard that.
But now it's 5. They say it's because of the elevation. I don't know, whatever. Everything above that is considered liquor or wine, depending on the class. So even High Point beer is technically liquor in the state of Utah, to which you have to go to a state-owned liquor store to purchase liquor, wine, High Point beer. By the way, they don't have refrigeration there. I think they're opening their first refrigerated liquor store, in a city nearby. So yeah, it's just kind of like a different culture, people are doing it all the time. That's what I kept saying to myself. I was like, people do it all the time. Just do it. Yeah. We'll figure it out. So
Yeah, I think in Florida, I'm pretty sure wine won't count as sake. From what I remember, it has to be from like a grape or a fruit. It's kind of like black and white in that sense. So you definitely have to get sake at liquor stores, but it's not government regulated. I actually used to live in Pennsylvania, and there, there it's all state owned, right? If you want to get liquor, you have to go to PA wine and liquor stores. But Florida doesn't have that problem. You can get your beers. Oh, excuse me. Oh man, I don't know what happened there. Yeah, right. You can get your beer and wine at the supermarket, gas station, CVS, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because I think that it's interesting. That kind of split really determines a lot about how you run your business. I know that I've got a distiller friend, and his main client is the Virginia ABC. Like he's got to serve it through that, and they're the ones who buy it. And it's all very numbers driven. I know that with other brewers in Canada, it's kind of the same way with their liquor control boards. And it can really change how you approach your business. It can change your whole business model. And I think that's one of the things that, as an association, it's really important that we continue to kind of understand the challenges that people are facing in this regard and try to figure out strategies for how we want to push things forward in the future. I mean, any idea or changes to law is something that's a long road and takes a lot of time and a lot of thought. But at least like bringing it to the table and saying, this is the issue we're facing, I think is just super, super important. So, we talked about laws. What other challenges do you guys are you guys facing right now? What are the things that are keeping you up at night? I know that Gabe, you'd mentioned some equipment issues or just the idea of sourcing equipment. How are you approaching that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting to just speak to brewers locally, although it's not so helpful considering that they're all beer brewers. In terms of, because I think I have a general idea of what I'm looking for, but sometimes I have 80 tabs open on my computer just trying to find the right stuff. I mean, it hasn't been easy. I actually went back to Toronto for a bit after I moved back to Miami, and I went to the brewery there, Izumi. I used to be a very fan favorite there. Let's say I should have had a rewards card, but I don't think they gave those out.
That's great.
But yeah, I spoke to a few of the people there. They do a little tours, and I was kind of looking at their equipment, talking to them, taking photos of their setup. Trying to learn more about it. I think that's sort of like the route I'm starting to take. I'm starting to kind of hit a brick wall in terms of finding the right equipment. So I would love to go to the breweries around that are closer than Canada, in cheaper flights, domestic, and sort of check out what other people.
Come visit.
I'm there. I'll take you up on it, because I will absolutely take you up on it.
I'll put you to work though.
That's okay. Free labor, right? It's we'll call it an internship.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's been a little difficult with the whole equipment, and I have this. I'm kind of ready to make that next step. I've been able to save a good amount, and I'm kind of ready to make that leap, and I just feel like I'm kind of stuck, and I'm just trying to find this point, whatever it is. I don't know exactly what it is what I'm looking for, but I feel like once I get to this point of, okay, this is what I need, then I'll just pull the trigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and so then, that kind of dilemma too of like finding a space and equipment. So I guess, have either of you guys identified spaces yet that you're looking at? Are there parts of town that you think would be more, good for you? I mean, I'm not really that familiar with Miami or Salt Lake. So what's your kind of hope? Are you going to be, brewery out in the mountains, or or are you going to be in the downtown areas? Like, what are you thinking?
For us so far, so we are looking at brewery spaces right now. I think street view, we kind of want to be accessible. So even to foot traffic, Salt Lake's really bike friendly as well. So somewhere probably downtown. And yeah, just looking at, what Gabe was saying, do you get equipment first, or do you do the brewery first? Which one's going to take longer? It seems like because of COVID, everything's kind of taking longer. So it almost makes you want to start the process even sooner, so that you can at least get it started. But it's true. Yeah. The matter is, which direction do you start first? Which is going to take longer? It's kind of hard to gauge that right now.
Yeah, and I think for me in Miami, especially in Miami, because it's such a tourist city, there's so many people always flying in for the weekend. It kind of depends on whether or not you want to attack locally or attack the tourism. And obviously the tourism brings a ton of money, a lot of foot traffic in those places, but with that comes the expenses. The downtown Miami is no joke with rent and all that stuff. And I haven't really decided on which route I want to go. I think I'm leaning towards more local. I don't mind having something local like downtown where there's a lot of foot traffic and got a lot of tourism there, and people walking in and out all the time would be great. But with that comes the exorbitant prices of the city and all that. And I'm trying to make it premium / affordable, as much as I can, at least to the extent that I can. I'm kind of a big believer on you can have something good for not as much, and the only way to do that, I think, is to be a little bit more in the outskirts. There's no mountains in Florida for that matter, let alone Miami. But you go a little further out west from the city, you enter into this territory where there's just a lot of more land, and there are a lot of cool places, and that's actually where that brewery is that I just mentioned. They're a little bit further out, not quite in the Everglades, but also not that far either.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I think that a part of that conversation is understanding your local demographic of who might be coming on your door, or how do you maybe distribute your product. And not that you have to choose one or the other, but sometimes it can help focus you on if we're going to shoot for regionally, or we're going to try to get people in our door. Do you guys have any idea of I know this is probably a tough question, but like scale, how big are you guys thinking? Are we smaller, more handcrafted, or are we going for a larger scale here? What are you guys feeling?
That's another riddle to be solved. It's hard to say, we have, our products launched in the spring. So we have that much data of how much people are consuming, which is useful. But as far as, I've seen William buy bigger equipment, bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's almost like, do you just bite the bullet and buy big and just cut the growing pains out? To which then it's like, you better get it right and start brewing this stuff, So yeah, they're all just, it's a big brainstorming drawing board to continue to reference to, with equipment, space, scale, source ingredients, So
yeah, I find that that equation is always a tough one, especially at this early stage where you're trying to kind of figure that out. And sake is really interesting in that every step is connected so intimately. The how you scale, or how you size your rice steamer, how you size your koji room, how you size your press, how you size your tanks are all really interconnected. It's not like you can just add more tanks and all of a sudden make more sake. It doesn't necessarily work that way. So I think it's scale is one of those things that is a really hard one to nail down. And that's why I think it's really interesting that you're, Jill, looking at some data. At least you've got product on the market. You're able to kind of see, this is what's moving. This is how quickly, maybe that can give you a benchmark to start planning your scale on.
Totally. Yeah. In addition to, there's costs with everything on top of it too, so it's like we keep swiping the card and then we pay it off and we swipe it again, so just making that slow climb, up to making it a bigger move to start construction. And
yeah,
I've been referencing a farthest star sake, watching him building his brewery. He's been working on it since last year, and it's been really cool to watch and have some reference to as well.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, like, she's referring to Todd Bellamy, who's a member of the association, and he is up in Massachusetts, and he is getting closer and closer to opening his brewery as well. So if you're interested in seeing how this stuff can progress, you should definitely follow him for sure. You mentioned something interesting there, which is money, and
Yeah.
so I guess that's part of it. Like, what do you guys, what's your approach and how you fund something like this? How do you get something of this scale off the ground? What are you guys doing? Are you doing, funding it yourself? Are you getting friends and family? Are you going out for outside investment? Bank loans? What's the plan there?
So right now I'm doing self-funding. Like I said, I've been pretty good at kind of saving a little bit. I been wanting to leave the practice of law since I think I started, and it's been a solid long 4 years, almost 4.5 years now that I've been doing it, and I've just been saving up for it. This is kind of like my major purchase that I want to do. It's more of like a passion project in the early stages, right? I just trying to do something that I want to make sure I get it right, and slowly evolve it to a real business. And at the end of the day, you have to think of it like that, right? And yeah, so the overall, I mean, I also used to be a tax lawyer, so this is another one that's kind of difficult to describe, but I mean, it's early on. I'm just kind of slowly putting the money and adding on to the equity into the company, right, into the LLC, and exactly what Jill's saying. I'm just paying for stuff and then paying it off, and I'm using that as what's like the buy-in. When I'm ready to make that leap, that green light that I'm kind of looking for, maybe I would seek out friends and family, get a little equity interest in it if they help out big enough.
As for Tsuki Sake, I have 2 other business partners. That was another serendipitous moment with how Tsuki was created. I had gotten wind from a local brewer, one of my buddies, that 2 guys were consulting him on opening a local sake brewery. And the same night that I was asking him, all these liquor laws about sake, like, could you do it? And he was just like, that's so weird that you're asking me this, because I just started consulting for these guys. And basically I cold called them, cold called William, and this is how it was all made. But as far as money goes, we are just kind of collaborating between the 3 of us to have the funds. We have a business account that we're just breaking even all the time so far right now. But yeah, I'm not sure if we would have investors once we actually do make that leap. That's something that is still on the drawing board that we also need to make decisions on, but nothing's decided yet. So,
well, it changes the game. I mean, I think it's like in early stages, I think that kind of bootstrapping and figuring it out is an incredible way to go. But I think, like you mentioned, at some point, big equipment purchases, leases, construction, can present real challenges. And so I think it's interesting to see how breweries develop and how they go from kind of idea to fully realized, and how the steps it might take to get there. I think there's a lot of different ways to do it, and I think for anyone out there who's kind of thinking about it, thinking about how to put it together, there's a lot of ways to go. You don't necessarily have to go straight to investment. It could be something you kind of bootstrap. It depends on kind of what you're trying to do.
I think the lease is the scariest part, because you're kind of locked in. You've got that cost every month, and that's what's always kind of scaring me in the back of my head.
Yeah, I think that, and landlords are kind of insane too. I mean, so commercial real estate is a whole thing. But on some level, at least for me, I know signing that lease was an empowering moment of this is real. It's time to roll.
Right.
Let's go for it. It's time to do it.
That'll definitely light the fire.
Yeah, it's what hits that catalyst of idea stage to reality, and like this is something that it's time to really push hard on. So yeah, there's just infinite ways to go about it for sure. So what do you guys think about, we talked about it a little bit, but like the future of sake here. So I think the current, to me, and I'd love to hear your the current landscape is that it feels like there's a lot of momentum. There's a lot of data saying that there's a lot of growth potential. But what do you guys think sake is going to look like in a few years? 2 years, 3 years, or even 10 years out? And what are you guys hoping to kind of contribute to that?
So what I envision sake to be is, what beer is, what wine is, what vodka is. I want it to be something that is just as normal, as it is in Japan, as it is in the US. I think it has the potential, absolutely. I mean, it's of course probably all of our favorite alcoholic drinks, I would assume, at least. And I envision, the brewery Big Water to sort of contribute to this snowball right now, and I think it's exactly right what you said. It really is growing at a crazy rate right now, and I think people are looking for something different. I still love my beers, my craft beers. I'll still go to a beer brewery and all that, but people are kind of looking and itching for something different. And you see it everywhere. You see it in Miami, you see it in all these cities. And I kind of hope that in the next, I don't know how many years, right? Whatever it is, 3, 7, 10 years, it's you don't just see sake in a sushi restaurant, right? I mean, my plan is to sell Big Water. Of course, I'm probably gonna have to start there. I'm gonna have to sort of fall into the stereotype for just a little bit, sell it into those restaurants, whether in liquor stores and that kind of stuff. But my plan is, there's a lot of big popular Miami establishments that definitely don't sell sake, but would they sell a Miami sake? I absolutely think so. I think Miami has a very they're very patriotic sometimes, in the sense of Miami, my city, etc. They do love their city, and I think I think not just myself, but that's kind of like the idea that I have, is going into these stores and restaurants and having sake that people be like, well, that's kind of strange. Let's try it. Make it affordable. It's a little bit more than beer, but it's got a lot more alcohol content, and more than wine too on top of that. So get people to start trying it in sort of quirky settings that you wouldn't normally find it. And I think that is a big way to get the conversation of going, that it doesn't have to be with your ramen, right?
Totally. I totally agree. I mean, I would love if I could go to my local bar or whatever, and there was sake on the menu just as an option to drink, so that's definitely one of my ambitions, is to, normalize it, make sure it's like you have cocktails, wine, beer, and sake, on as an option, and not just in Japanese restaurants. Also, I think Patrick from Ben's Tune Up, he does a 12% sake. So like even lower, like experimenting, modernizing, lowering the ABV to make it, for lack of a better word, like more crushable, instead of if you have one Genshu and it's 18-19%, you're like, that's one and done, so yeah, just
maybe for you.
Yeah. Well, not during quarantine, that's for sure.
we all build our tolerances during quarantine.
Yeah, I was like, this is my second one. But yeah, so just kind of playing around with it. I think our brand, we've always tried to balance modern American with traditional Japanese. And so that's definitely kind of how I want to contribute. And there's just so many different ways to enjoy sake. I had a Namagenshu Daigenjo, the Nihon Sakari today, and it was so amazing cold. And then as it warmed up, it bloomed in all these different ways, so I think there's just so many different approaches that you could go. And it definitely is a growing market, and I think that's one of the reasons why William has agreed to help me grow our brand, is because he knows that he's helping grow the American sake industry, and that it is kind of budding, but also blooming a lot right now. So
I think you also nailed it with the kind of making it weaker and experimenting more, right? Because I mean, beers like Sapporo and Asahi, they all are rice based, right? And not something you typically used to, and they're amazing, right? I mean, you should experiment. You should kind of tailor a little bit to your market so that you have more options. And yeah, I think a lot of people who don't ever really drink sake and they see it at a bar, they start ordering it, they might overdo it because they won't realize how much they're drinking. So that's probably another good reason to do it. But absolutely, I'm totally on board with everything.
I was gonna say, I like that analogy of a nice glass of daiginjo coming to room temperature. Is like that's the American landscape. It's like it's going to bloom. Just give it some time.
Oh yeah, totally.
Well, it brings up a great question. It's like for you two, like, what do you think? Like when you hear, styles of sake, like what does that mean to you, and what do you hope that you can bring to that? Like what can North American brewers bring to the table?
I think that it's definitely what ways, let's see. In Japan, they're very traditional. They've been troubleshooting this beverage for centuries, right?
I love that word, troubleshooting, by the way. That's a really nice way to put it.
Yeah, perfecting this beverage. They have it.
I think
They have it dialed
makes more
down.
sense.
I mean, going all the way back to when they were just like chewing on the rice and spitting it out before they had koji. They were still making it, and but they're very traditional. And from what I've heard, the age gap between tojis, it's like the head toji's 80 and then the new toji's 20. So it's like there's no real middle ground. It's like very old style and then like new style. Like how are these young tojis going to experiment and kind of step out of the traditional ways that it's been brewed and that your great grandfather's been brewing it, and all those different ways. I think we're not as confined to how you can categorize sake in the US as they are in Japan. Like I'm pretty sure, isn't it illegal to even homebrew in Japan?
I believe that's still true.
Yeah. So I think that we have the advantage of being able to play around with it more, modernize, while also, totally bowing and respecting the traditions of it. And, I've heard other brewers, they're playing around with koji rice with their beer, which I think is awesome. So, Gabe?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I would probably just repeat everything you said. I think that we have, the ability here to play with it, and it's kind of what I said before, right? Where they played with our beer, we can play with their sake. We can make something our own, and make it so that it's whatever we want it to be, and there's ways to sort of tailor it to your crowd. I think one of the challenges that I might have is the hot weather here in Miami. I feel like sake, a lot of the times I really enjoy it when I was living in Toronto in the winter, sometimes with my ramen. I know I said something, and you can eat it with other stuff, but I also eat it with ramen. And it was very cozy in that sense, even though it was still colder. And so that's something I'm kind of debating on how to deal with that, and it has to adapt, right? Because at the end of the day, you're drinking sake in Florida, you're not drinking it in Japan, and so it's going to be a bit different, and it's just going to have to adapt to the local culture. You know what I mean?
We did an event. It was July. It was 100 degrees outside, and people always associate sake as hot, right? And we had to draw this giant, like, handwritten sign, cold sake, because people, they were just walking. They're like, "Oh, that sounds terrible." And I'm like, "It's cold," So I think that's definitely a good marketing tool for Miami, for sure, is that it's cold.
Yeah. I have to put like snowflakes around the cold sake too, so that they say, start associating with cold weather.
It's a big question as chairman. It's one that's dear to my heart, because the reason this association exists is to help grow the industry and to help aspiring brewers get a leg up and to be able to have a successful business and to grow sake as a whole in North America. So when you guys think about an association, what do you hope to gain from being a member? What do you hope that, like, what can we do? I just think it's always an important question for me. What can we do to help?
So I mean, like I was kind of mentioning, it was the association that kind of led me to believe, you know what, I think it's time to incorporate, get things started. You know, the association itself was very, I was, needless to say, very excited to see it there. This awesome resource that has all these different, you know, links for resource, equipment, all that stuff. And, you know, now that I've, you know, got a chance to sort of meet you guys a little personally, I'm probably going to start messaging Andrew and Jill and anyone else who wants to be messaged by me. I will message you and I will probably show up to your brewery as well. I might do a little USA tour if that's okay with you guys. I will show up, knock on the door, and put me to work, as Andrew said it, you know. And I think that's the best way to learn, is to, and maybe it's not, but it's the way I learned, is trial by fire. You know, it's and once I graduated, it was just like, hey, do this, do that. And I said, oh, I have no idea what I'm doing, but you just kind of figure it out when you're kind of thrown into the mix of it. And so, you know, I'm appreciating, I'm learning a lot online. Of course, I'm learning a lot, trying new sakes, but it's really I'm learning a lot more when I'm talking to people who knows about it, who has experienced it, right? Because you're talking to someone who's been doing this for 6 years. I can then sort of get that 6-year knowledge, you know, obviously not in that short of time, but like in the conversation, I can, you know, make, you know, huge advances. And so I think the idea is I would love to sort of talk to more people in the association, go visit the breweries, see what they do it, how they do it, look at the equipment, even go through the whole process for however, you know, however long you guys do your batches before bottling. And you know, that's kind of my take on that. That's what I would really love to do.
I totally agree. I mean, networking is huge. You know, I kind of had the idea of starting a local sake brewery like years ago, and I didn't know where to start. I didn't know how to source brewing equipment. Where do you buy rice? I know you need a really special yeast for this, you know, like, so all of those questions, those daunting questions, I feel like the association has definitely helped with, for sure, as far as networking, and where to kind of start. Andrew's same, like I'll probably be messaging you and asking you about scale after this, and getting your input on, you know, because we're making a move, you know, to open our brewery. But yeah, I just think sake is all about education. You know, the more, I love talking to people who know what I'm talking about, instead of, I know you've had moments where you ramble off and you have a nerdy moment and they're just blank staring at you. So yeah, just having a community, I guess, to soundboard ideas. You know, if we brew sake and it's like a funky color, like, hey, has this happened to anyone else? You know, so that's a huge support system to have, for sure, when you're taking such a big leap. You know, you're just jumping. So
yeah. I mean, I think that's the key, because, like, you know, I think about when we first started and just feeling, you know, almost like alone on a desert island, like, who can I talk to about some of these things? And I hope that we can continue to develop a community where people can feel comfortable asking questions. They can feel comfortable, you know, reaching out and, you know, build a real community. I think that's like the beauty of what we're hoping to achieve. And so I hope that that's for you guys too. I hope that works well. I guess we're coming close to the end, but I want to leave a few minutes at least for some questions. I know that no one's really jumped in yet, but I don't know if anyone's got any questions out there. They've kind of heard the conversation and has anything to say. So feel free to unmute and kind of just ask anything that you're thinking. At the same time, I guess, like, do you have any advice for other aspiring brewers? What are, you know, some things that you have already experienced and you think is important for people to kind of know going into this thing?
I think innovate, collaborate, and, you know, help help each other, I think it's huge, you know, because it's new territory. It's a new niche. It's growing, but yeah, it's definitely new.
Yeah, I'd say just, prepared to dedicate time to it, right? I mean, I think what
Mhm.
it's tough to start a new endeavor. Most of us, had prior jobs and we were doing, what is it? I'm trying to balance the two right now. And I knew this was going to be difficult. I knew I was going to have long nights. I kind of expected it all. And, kind of waiting to do that next leap is just making it, last longer. But just kind of telling yourself and setting that expectation helps. Right before I started, I said, this is gonna be tough for a while, and that's okay. And then that's kind of the mentality you need and the grind that's going to be necessary, right?
Grind. The grind is real.
But yeah, not just questions, but any comments or suggestions, I'm all ears.
Hi, my name's Joe. And I had a quick question for you guys. Just in terms of, it seems like from the conversation that you guys starting out have focused on either cold calls or, directly selling to restaurants or perhaps even, opening your own brewery for sales. Have you guys also looked into or have utilized other avenues such as farmers markets or online sales, or have you attempted to go down those routes to sell, or are you primarily focused on restaurants in your own brewery, just out of curiosity?
So I definitely have been taking those sales calls for sure. When our products landed in the spring, it was time to sell it. And so I just started pounding the pavement, basically just kind of showing up at restaurants, or I've noticed with sales, you have to be there. If you call them, you probably won't hear back. You kind of have to be not pushy, but just make sure that you leave an impression and you've set up a specific time. So a lot of it was brewer turned sales, which I have sales background anyway. So that was useful for sure in this situation. But yeah, definitely I wrote out a list of, Japanese restaurants locally that I really wanted to make sure carried us, and they are, and it's awesome. But the new challenge is getting, like we said, other bars, like American style places to carry us next. And all of that just comes with education. So perhaps sake classes, tastings, those are probably on the drawing board for me as well, just to build our brand locally and make sure people know what they're drinking. I've also, asked people, people are like, oh, I love sake. And I'm like, awesome. What's your favorite one? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, well, what's the name of one that you had that you liked? And they're like, I don't know. It was in Japanese, So a lot of it too is just that education thing where you're constantly, I call it like the sake pamphlet, like the frequently asked questions that you just always like have ready to answer. To help build your brand and help with sales. So
Yeah, I think for me, I too have a list of places that I'm looking to start out, and I've kind of split it up into tiers that you like graduate into. So of course I'm not distributing yet, but the tiers sort of start out in those Japanese restaurants, especially the ones that are pretty local, get a lot of foot traffic in Miami, and a lot of the ones more in the city, right, where they're really always like a lot of people for after work drinks, that kind of stuff. Sort of attack those places first, then sort of graduate to the liquor stores, maybe some upper scale restaurants at that time, and I think after that my tier was it was liquor stores, upscale restaurants. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me. Oh, right, and shipping it locally to the. So I actually went to undergrad in Tampa, Florida, and so I kind of want to keep that sort of Florida brand. I know. So Big Water, for those who don't know, is actually what Miami means in Native American, It refers to Lake Okeechobee, which is the really gigantic lake in Florida. And so that's kind of where the namesake came from. It's something that I had in my notes on my iPhone since like 2014 or something. And I've gotten, upgraded my iPhones here and there, and I back it up and it's still there in my notes. And when it was time to start it, I opened up my notes and I was like, that's right, I want to call it Big Water.
Nice. That's
And
awesome.
so so it means Miami in that sense, which is cool. It's my hometown, all that stuff, but it also refers to a landmark in Florida. And my next step was to sort of go to Tampa, where I have a few connections there with restaurant industry and that kind of stuff, and sort of expand there, because obviously the logistics to do, to not just sell it in your city is a little bit more difficult. And I think once I graduate that tier, and it's just sort of graduating until I'm done with diplomas, if you will. I don't know when that is, but eventually I'll stop.
That's awesome, because Big Water, I thought it was because like sake is made 80% of it is water. So I thought that's why that was the name, but that's cool. It's named after my.
I can definitely play to that. That's a good idea. I didn't think about that.
Well, water is important.
My gift to you.
I would throw into to that question is that there's a lot of ways to go, obviously, in how you market and push your product out there. And we found a lot of different, and you kind of have to sometimes, especially in the time of COVID. We pivoted pretty heavily towards direct to consumer shipping, and found that to be a nice addition to a revenue stream. And what's really wonderful is that you can do that.
And back to your question, Joseph, sorry. The farmers markets, we can't do that in Salt Lake. So it has through, there's definitely hurdles with our liquor laws. It has to go through the Utah liquor store. And then even the restaurants purchase it, all of their alcohol that they sell from the Utah liquor store, and then they sell it. So it's just.
It depends on state law of what you can do. I think that farmers markets, I think, are off limits for us too, but there are other grassroots ways to build community. Like we've done both from the direct to consumer side, where we do like tasting kits, or we do, private tastings, maybe with like a corporate event where you've got, these teams now that are across the country all working from home. We can send them something and everyone can join together on a Zoom and do it. And then other things like, events like country clubs or other things where people are able to just have an intimate experience. And so, you do have to get creative. You've obviously got natural distribution channels, you've got natural restaurant channels, but there's a lot of other ways to think creatively to try to get your product out there. And I would say, like, push on anyone that seems to be good and seems to work. I see a hand raised here from Ellen.
Yes. Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Oh, good. Yeah, I can't figure out how to get myself looking like me, but anyhow, so I'm really kind of a strange participant here, because I am a wine person and also got a lot of sake certifications, and I ski in Park City. I have a house there, and I live in Miami. So I was so fascinated to see both of you.
That's
My
awesome.
sake visit actually was to Islander Sake in Honolulu, which was fabulous. I mean, what an amazing thing they've accomplished there. But I've always thought that the way to expand the market with sake is to take all of the sushi Japanese restaurants, and there are so many in Miami, it's remarkable. And there are even plenty in Utah. And get those people to put on some classes and do some really education of the people who think sushi is a food group. There's loads of people there who have no idea what to do when they walk in a place and they eat sushi 3 times a week. There's not the education right there in the kind of the most obvious, lowest hanging fruit going on. And I don't know exactly how you do that, but as a wine educator, I've worked a lot in places like wine bars. And that's, you can connect to people like that. It's pretty easy to do that if you can just get their attention. So I would just throw that into the mix.
Totally. I definitely, it's funny you mentioned that, because that was on the drawing board as of yesterday for a direction that I could go.
Yeah.
This brewery thing is going to take a while. So think of like, you know, what other projects, and I think that's one of the things too with, you know, starting a company is you're constantly trying to figure out how you can be growing with, like, if this area is stagnant over here, like what can you be doing over here to be applicable
Well,
down the road.
So I have certifications from John Gautner and also from the Wine and Spirits Education Trust in Sake. I mean, I have a lot of education, and there are a lot of people like me out there, and not many of them are doing very much with it. Like it's not like the wine education that's going on. And it seems like that's a huge untapped resource for you guys. There are all these people out there who know a lot and are just like not going anywhere with it.
Yeah, it's like, what do you do with it now?
Yeah, right. It's true.
And I would say too that, like, you know, maybe Wes, that's something we can discuss, like how do we pull more, you know, WSET and Gautner graduates to partner with local breweries to help push the word. I love that idea. Thank you.
Right, sure.
And I love that you're going back and forth between Utah and Florida.
Yeah,
How can it get better than that?
Yeah. You have great
Have to be
taste.
very low.
Let me make a derogatory comment. I'm the old guy at the top of the screen. We're starting off in rural Ontario, or what may be rural Ontario. It's in Prince Edward County. It's a high wine producing, apple producing, craft, everything. Basically a rural area, very scenic, and we're starting out from scratch. But we're placed between Montreal, Toronto, Kingston, that part of North America, and with easy access to places like New York and Boston. And that may be our ultimate market for and if we get going. Now we're sort of doing it differently. Since we don't live in Miami, we're building our own Miami. So we're building a small resort and then a sake brewery from scratch. And then one of the problems we have is that there's no housing for employees because it's so heavily touristified that the house in the county is now a bed and breakfast. We have to provide housing for our employees, and we're also going to require employees maybe from Japan, we don't know. But when you're talking about going to, and maybe because the market up here is quite different than it is in the United States, that we have one single alcohol control agency, Liquor Board of Ontario, which is probably the biggest buyer of booze almost in the world. Anyone who buys booze except for private brands through dealers usually buys through the liquor board, including every little restaurant in town. And if you're going to go anywhere, you have to go to the liquor board and get certified by them to sell your product. And so it's difficult to walk around with booze in your back pocket and say, how would you like to try my sake or anything else? In fact, I think it's often considered to be illegal to do that, to go and buy away. But the thing I was really going to say, rather than this long is that I don't know if it's true in the United States, where you may have more of a melting pot than we do in Canada. We tend to settle up here in small little countries. So where I'm from in Toronto, we have a Spanish town, a Koreatown, a Chinatown, and a lot of people from all around the world mingle, but they stay within their communities. And also, they tend to buy businesses in cohort. But the sushi restaurants in Toronto are mostly controlled and owned by one Asian ethnic group. And they all seem to have a similar menu. They all seem to deal with the same alcohol people. And they seem to have a set menu. So they don't appear to be a great access for listing additional sakes. There are some places that are catered to other parts of the community, particularly the financial community, and some other places, and also the wealthier parts of the innumerable ethnic communities we have up here. Is that they have a great deal of money to be able to spend on sake, which I guess will be ultimately our market, rather than looking for millennials that come to Prince Edward County. Which, you can look that up if you want. And so attracting sales up here really means you have to have a destination to go to, so that listing yourself at the LCBO is only the second or third stage, or actually going into restaurants. And I don't know whether this is any more successful in the States, where that may be your model, to go around and go to different restaurants, or whether, as you would in Canada, you join the blank restaurant association, which means, and then try and sell your alcohol there. So I don't know whether our experiences are either likely to be the same or are the same, but there must be some area of overlap between what you guys are experiencing and what we think we're going to experience up here.
I think that they're different, but they can be similar depending on where you live. So, like depending on if it's a liquor controlled state that can do higher alcohol wines, like it sounds like Salt Lake City, or not. I don't have a ton of experience with Canada. I know that I had some talks with how that works a little bit. And it sounds like on some level with sake, at least, with a liquor control board, you kind of have to be able to supply a certain amount. And then you also have to then hopefully sell through enough that it becomes something that they can have the data to rebuy and to kind of keep moving year over year. From what I've heard, it's like they place large orders to then distribute out to the stores, depending on the province. So I think they're different beasts, and it does affect a lot of how you start your business. Like knowing the infrastructure of the law and how that system works can greatly affect how you will build your brewery at the end of the day. Like if you know that an LCBO order is going to be a certain size, well, that's a good place to start. But if you are able to be, more organic, start small, distribute locally, like in some states that you can do here in the States, it's a whole different game. So, it's a tough one because I know that every state, every country has different laws, but
we'll probably have some insight there. Is Momokawa.
For sure.
Momokawa is really big in Toronto. They're in all the LCBOs there. They probably have some insight. I don't know if they're a member or not, the association, but
the LCBO sells a certain amount of sake. It doesn't sell a lot of really expensive sake.
Right.
You have to go to places like, you've been in Toronto, either Zen or Key or someplace like that. You want to buy something that costs $200 or $300 a bottle, but it's sort of mid-range sake. But the model up here seems to be, and we're probably the outlier in that, once we get going, is they set up a restaurant with a small brewery in it. And that's the case in the one brewery in Toronto. The guy who owns the brewery is known as the Sushi King. He's probably the biggest distributor of sushi in this part of the country. And then Brewers in Vancouver, and there may be one in Montreal, but I don't know whether they're up and running yet. But they all seem to be restaurant associated. That seems to be more of a pattern for success, and they brew their own customers. And then the one in Toronto has actually managed to expand, and they're listed in the Liquor Control Board of Ontario, and they're selling across at least the bigger cities in Ontario. And I think they may have an export license to go to the States, but I don't know that for sure. But they're but it's also a restaurant based originally. So there's nothing where we're going to, you guys, like you seem to be able to. Oh, sorry about that. Montreal just scored, very interesting. They have the pattern seems to start a restaurant with a brewery attached to it and go from there. I don't know if that's the more successful way of going in the States or not.
So it looks like Shinpei has had his hand up for a little while. I'd love to hear what your question is.
Thanks. I'm calling in from Japan, actually. So this is enlightened me for the context that you guys have over in the States, and each state is different. I have a question about the process that all three of you went to, from home brewing to, I guess, various stages of where you are, and what that journey entails in terms of how do you go from like sourcing your own equipment and materials, and what kind of experimentation you have done. I think, Gabe, you glossed over, you were saying you made 100 liters. I don't know how long you did that. Can you give us a little bit more details there? Thanks.
Yeah. So, I mean, it started off, like I said, more of like a passion project. It's something that I always love to drink, right? And so, like a lot of people who brew beer in the United States, is early on, they just do it because they love beer and say, hey, I want to make it at home. Same thing. You know, I love sake. I said, let's try to make it at home. Wasn't easy. The trial and error was tough, because especially this was before the Sake Brewers Association to help me out with some resources. There's a lot of Googling, Google Translate, because a lot of things were in Japanese. A lot of the play-by-plays, I ended up getting a lot of the books from Gartner as well. And you know, I was able to eventually, you know, find the stuff, whether it be like at a local homebrew store or online somehow. I just managed to get my hands on it. And as I sort of kept doing it, you know, month by month, it finally got to a point where I could start bottling a decent amount. I mean, 100 liters goes a long way. I was able to give to like my friends and my family, that kind of stuff, for a bit. And so once I was doing that, I said, you know what, like if I just make this good enough, I can just always make it at home, and then I don't have to go out and drink it anymore. But then, you know, you obviously want to try other stuff. This is a young Gabe. And so as I kept going, I said, you know, one day I would love to have a brewery. And then it just kind of fizzled out, right? Just law school and work. I just kind of, I lost track of time, right? Time gets away from me pretty quickly. And so and then, you know, fast forward, that's when I said, hey, I can actually do something, get the bigger, better equipment, especially with this association. I mean, this association has been awesome. I think it was such a great idea to have a couple of brewers put their heads together and create this thing. And now it can actually sort of start replacing this equipment. I mean, the equipment is really like, it's hard to explain, but you're kind of just like piecing this thing together. It's almost like this Frankenstein, if you will. You know, it's all these equipment. I ended up buying a couple of things from Japan, actually, a couple of things from China. I bought a few things at a brewer store, you know. And so it was a little hard, especially early on when there wasn't enough resources. But now with everyone kind of getting into it, the sake culture is really growing here. There's a lot more resources, a lot more English resources, which is important for people who can't speak Japanese, right? So that's been really helpful.
I skipped the home brewing step. I was going to start home brewing, but then I actually bought the rice and the koji and the yeast and the lactic acid through someplace in Oregon. I forget the name of it now. And then I was going to buy I had a full wish list in my Amazon cart of all the equipment that I would need. And I was about to buy all of it, but I wanted to get some advice from William first. And he kind of derailed me from that, from that experience. But I would not be against trying it, but it does sound like it's a lot of, even the equipment that we're using at Colorado Sake, a lot of it's like a wine fermenter or a beer fermenter, a lot of beer equipment. I was working with a couple brewers that went to brewery school, fermentation school, and they were just like, we learned about sake in like one day. They could just kind of glossed over it. And so a lot of the brewing techniques here are just makeshift, where you're just, Frankensteining it and just trying to see what you can use that works, and trial and error. and here we are. But I am a firm believer in making connections, for sure, networking and collaborating. We're only going to help each other, grow the industry by doing that. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think my journey is similar in certain ways, and that, fell in love with sake, and then in kind of was like, I'm going to try to make it. And you quickly realize how difficult it is, how time consuming, but the rewards of it are so fantastic. I just remember making koji for the first time, and the aroma just blew me away. I couldn't believe, I was like, what am I smelling? So it kind of like, it pulled me in deep. It was just kind of like, I don't understand this, but I love it. And so I just kind of kept pushing on it and kept working towards it. And, I think that, like everyone's saying, there's a huge lack of resources. Equipment is difficult to find. And everyone's kind of piecing it together as best they can to make it work. Something that I have found was just so valuable for me, was visiting other breweries. Like when I first started out, I remember doing a road trip and visiting, going out to see Blake in Minneapolis, and going out to Sake One, and visiting, going to Brooklyn-Kura, on the US side, and then also being able to go to Japan, luckily before this lockdown and before this, was able to go over there and to see and participate in that. It's invaluable, I think, like Gabe said, like being able to physically see it, to touch it, to feel it. There's a lot of text, and sometimes it can be hard to internalize and to understand what they're actually talking about. And obviously now, 3 years into owning a brewery, I'm getting it more and more. I'm still learning every single day. But I think that, sake is a hands-on thing. Like, I think the scale side of it is one of the things that I think is really important for all new brewers to really internalize and understand, and at least try to understand, is like you going from, 10 kilos of rice to like 300 kilos of rice, working koji, like you're doing like, 200 kilos of koji. That's a whole nother game. So, it's a tough thing. It's hard to see that. And, you can kind of see it and go, okay, I get it. But like when you do it, when it's 2 a.m. and you're freaking, making koji, like, so yeah, and I think that too, like, I think that it speaks a lot to the beverage itself, and that like, that people do that. People stay up all night tending to koji to make sure it is just, my koji room. These are my little bassinets, man. These are my babies. Like it's like nothing else, and it's so rewarding, but it's really hard. And I admire anyone who looks toward this thing as that's something they want to do because it's serious. And you're in the big game, you know, with other sake brewers and other alcohols out there. It's a lot of competition, but like the rewards are just unlike anything else. So, you know, I'm not sure what it's like for you in Japan and what you're thinking, but man, I love brewing sake.
Thank you. I also brewed sake for a couple of years, so I just have a different context, you know, like
sure.
all the Japanese equipment and the bigger batches. So I just don't have a clue about what home brewing would be like with 10 kilos of rice. I don't even know what
It
that
was
means.
different. I mean, I would say too, like for me, it's like thinking about brewing 10 kilos or you know, like a 5-gallon bucket. Like I would say the encouragement for both Jill and Gabe is like when you move from a small scale to large scale, it makes more sense. It's easier in some ways. The fermentation is more consistent. There's like weight to it, I would say maybe. but yeah, then it gets more physical. It's more time consuming. It's a bigger deal. You know, you want to make sure your, you know, 200 kilos of koji are going to be good. So it's like a big deal. So anyway. Well, cool. We've gone over our time, obviously quite a bit. But I appreciate everyone who participated. Jill, Gabe, it was great to get to know you, to learn about what you're doing.
Thanks for having us.
Just awesome. I appreciate everyone who joined. Hope it was informative. And I hope you guys all go out and drink sake, like drink local sake producers, drink Japanese sake. We're here for it. Wes, I don't know if you have any final parting words. But yeah,
So just
wonderful.
just to thank you all for joining tonight, and thanks especially to Jill and Gabe for your time and your insights tonight. I think it was really fascinating discussion, and just for everyone's edification, we have recorded this session and we'll post it on our YouTube channel. So if you want to refer to it later on, by all means, please check it out. And stay tuned for other webinars that we'll be doing in the future and other activities. So you can always check us out at www.sakeassociation.org. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. I
Much
appreciate
love.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Gabe. You guys are awesome.
it. Thanks. I'm coming to Virginia.